Hello everyone, welcome to TechEd 2020. This case is about Royal Greenland and empowering local fishermen through outstanding digital solutions. My name is Nursel. I am Head of Digital Design at Trifork Smart Enterprise. We have been SAP App House network partners since 2019. We strongly believe in taking a human-centered approach in everything we do. That is why this project brought us all the way to Greenland to conduct the field research. This project is about transforming lives by bringing SAP processes into the hands of local fishermen. And to tell you more about this, I have Lars Bo Hassinggaard from Royal Greenland, the CIO, to tell you more about.
Thank you, Nursel, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to tell us a little bit about what we have been doing with Trifork and the SAP solutions. So our solution is actually a question of digitalizing the small-scale fishermen in Greenland. And to set the scene, I would like to explain a little bit about what is Royal Greenland and what we are doing. We are a fishing company. We are in the fishing industry. We have our own fleet of big factory trawlers. We have land-based factories. We are acting global, but we have a focus on the northern cold waters, which is actually where most of our product comes from. We are owned by the Greenlandic Home Rule, so we are a very big company in Greenland. In Greenland, we have 39 factories, give and take a few. We have 8 factory trawlers, which are quite big factories, and then we have a variety of small vessels. The solutions that we have been working on here in this project we are presenting today is not about our own factories. It's not about our own factory trawlers and the small vessels. This is about the local fishermen that is suppliers to our factories. And we have factories in Greenland. We have factories in Canada, Quebec, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia. We have factories in Germany, Chile, and Norway. And then, of course, we also have a little bit of production in China. Our sales subsidiaries are placed in Europe. Main countries. We have a sales subsidiary in Japan and in Canada and also in the United States. What our customers are retail customers, it's food service, and of course it's also some industry sales to other processors in the industry. And the main challenge for this project is infrastructure and connectivity. In Greenland, a very, very big island, 39 factories we have scattered around the coastline, west coast of Greenland. There's no roads between the cities. You can only go by boat or you can go by plane. So it's not compared to anything else in the world. And also from a truly infrastructure part, which is the connectivity and internet access and things like that, then it has been expanded the last years, but it has been really, really bad. Now we are at a situation where we actually believe that making an application is possible, and that is very, very good news for us. Secondly, also when we do solution in Royal Greenland, this far away and this big distances and makes it difficult to actually implement things. So we need to do it well. We need to do robust applications. We need to do simple applications. And we quite often bundle things into a joint solution. So being near the fish means also that we are at the outskirts of the world. And where did it all start with this project? It started back in 2018 at a hackathon at SAP Innovation Forum in Copenhagen, where we was asked, do you have a really nice process that you want to make digital? And we came up with this raw material purchase from the local fishermen. There was a lot of things that actually, you can see that 2018 is 2 years from now, it's 2020 now. But why did it take so long? Because there were some legal constraints we need to look into. We need to make sure that what we did was actually okay with the Greenlandic law. There was some policy, and also the impact of what we are doing in Greenland is very big. We are by far the biggest company in Greenland. So what we do is important, and it's important for us, but it's also important for the society. And of course, we also needed to evaluate a little bit on the business impact. We are this part of our purchasing process in a competitive market. So it is important that what we do is actually it supports the business and it supports our bottom line. And then, of course, again, the practicalities, end of the world, the mobile services, some of our factories is run by satellite link, etc., etc. So putting all this together, we found out that it was a pretty good idea, and then was the decision taken, and we did start the development of the app, which is not one app, it's actually 3 apps. It is an app for the fishermen, it's an app for shop floor control, and then it's a web application for back-end office handling of the purchase orders into SAP and the data that the apps are catching. Why is it so difficult? You can have a view of it here. Those are the small boats that we are supporting with this solution. It is not big factory trawlers. There's seasonality, there's bad weather, there is ice, there are difficult infrastructure on the port side. There's not proper harbors, etc., etc. So having a solution that makes this work in reality is important for us. So you have to be there, you have to see the conditions before we can actually do something. Another thing is that it's not only summer fisheries, as the pictures here shows, but we also have fishing conditions like this. We have heavy ice, you have very cold conditions, and actually being able to work on the old paper-based solution was difficult under those conditions. So basically, this was where it all started, and we hope that we can really achieve something by supporting those people on the pictures here with digital solutions. So what was it actually that we would try to achieve here? We have actually made 3 apps. One for the fisherman. It is this guy in his boat. Then we have made one for the shop floor, where we actually trying to add some knowledge to the products, and then we of course has made the final interface as a web web application towards SAP. And why is this important? It is really, really important for us to get this information from the fishermen. We need to know where they have been fishing, how much they have caught, what is the quality, what kind of catch tools have they been using, how many hooks have they been used, what is the average weight of the fish, was there any bycatch, and what was it? And why do we do this? We do this because that we are such a big part of the community in Greenland. We want to fish sustainable. This is part of our DNA. And to be able to do so and also get those certification, MSC certification, we need to do data catch on a lot of different things. Also something that is really not important for us as a company, but it is important for us as an industry to catch this data. And we didn't really have a really good solution for it. It was paper-based, everything. The fisherman need to go in to the office, taking his small piece of paper telling us that it was caught here, it was caught on this license, it was caught with this measures and things like that. And then he handed over the goods to us. Then we did need to put on some additional quality stuff, like what is the sensoric and what is the smell and the texture of the fish and what temperatures did we have and things like that. That was also recorded on the same piece of paper. And being a fisherman, being outside in the minus 10, 15, 20 degrees, you have cold hands, it's difficult for them to operate this. There's also the physical things on the factories. They have to walk quite far because you can see that they are actually bringing the goods on shore with a crane. So they had to spend a lot of time on this process, and cold hands, bad pens, and made it difficult to actually read what was on this piece of paper. And it is important for us. So we decided, okay, let's go for an app. Let's see what we can pick up of those fishermen. So that was what we did. We made that app for the fishermen. And also doing that, it is important for us that the fishermen actually get some insight in what they are doing. Normally, you have your own home budget. You know what your income is. You know what kind of money you have to spend it every month. But in that community, the small community, bringing financial data, bringing other kinds of data to the fishermen is quite important for them. And before actually the app was here, we are also in this process of buying raw materials from the local fishermen. We have built a big application in SAP actually handling the fact that we need to collect union fees for them. We need to collect taxes on behalf of the government. We need also to collect debt if they have debt to third parties. We have also provided funding possibilities so that they can put a little aside of their cash every time they are bringing fish onto the port side. So we are such a big part of actually helping the fishermen in their daily lives, because this is not a tradition necessarily everywhere in Greenland. So this big part of bringing local fishermen closer to the business is quite important. And now we've just taken that step further, bringing that insight into their own lives in the hands with an application, and they can get actually the financial information and how many kilos have been caught of each species and things like that. So for us, it is a really nice story to tell. So actually 3 apps, one for the fishermen, one for the shop floor, and one for the back office in our factories. And this is where we are coming from. This piece of paper you can see on the top picture. This is a Greenlandic fisherman. He has been out fishing, and then we are going to something that looks a little bit like what we are seeing below, where they can actually tell what they have been bringing in and how the condition has been. And what was our thoughts about this project? Actually, we are running SAP in Royal Greenland as a wall-to-wall solution, so of course it would be a smart thing to make sure that this installation that we have been working on and fine-tuning for many years also was a part of the future solution in the app part. We are though running other mobile solutions. We have a mobilizer, we have Liquid UI for smaller things, but when we did the decision, we also were thinking of what is the business impact, what is the strategic position of the project, and what we have been doing in other terms was actually to say, okay, this is a small solution, this is a quick fix. We can use some tools for that, but for this project, it was a strategic project. We could see a big business impact moving forward, bringing those fishermen closer to us, and we can also see already now that in the backlog, with good ideas of things that we can actually put into this application, we can see that having a well-defined architecture, having a well-designed solution is really important. So that was really important for us, and also making use of this really strong internal SAP competences that we have. So we can bring deep insight into SAP, deep insight into our businesses in Greenland, and then actually trying to bridge that with an application. And for sure, we were not really good at doing applications internally at Royal Greenland. It was a new thing for us. So it was really nice, and it was a challenge for us to actually team up with somebody who actually knew about UI and app things, what is working and what is not working. Another thing that was really nice for us and really important for us in this project was this design thinking workshops we did, and also this approach with an MVP. The thing is, we have, of course, our company has we have our own DNA. We also have a quite good feeling about what is working and what is not working. So making constantly changes to solutions in Greenland where it's difficult to actually implement things. It's difficult to be there on site. 39 factories, you can only fly between them. Means that when we do something, it needs to be pretty much fixed. So this MVP thinking is, of course, really important, but also trying to bend the ends towards a more finished solution is important. And this has been a really good process for us and also for our partner actually to work with an MVP as a concept, but still having a fixed solution. And why is that important? Because we have high employee turnover in Greenland. We have a very few key users that is actually trained and doing well. We have language problems. In Greenland, the main language is, of course, Greenlandic. It's only very few people speaking that. 50,000 in the world is speaking Greenlandic. The second language is Danish, and not all Greenlandic people do speak Danish, and English is for the few. And of course, this things about getting around is a bit difficult, and it's also extremely costly. And also, one really nice thing about this project is that the words has been around in Greenland, and everybody has an opinion on this. We have also in our backlog thought about having rescue in Greenland. It's a big and difficult task for people, for those who are actually doing that, for the security, for those who do, I guess it's the army. But they have actually contacted us to be able to talk about solutions for the fishermen, because if we know a fisherman has been going out fishing and we know he has been at a certain point at a certain time, then if he's missing, why don't we go look there? And every year people are disappearing in Greenland. They can go out fishing, they go out hunting, and they might not come back. And then it's really nice to be able to find out where have they been the last time anyone has seen them. And then, of course, it is really, really important for us to have this sustainability part. We are in our DNA a sustainable fishing company. We want to fish today. We want to fish tomorrow. And being able to fish in 2 or 3 years means that we have to be very focused on having a stock of fish that is fishable. And bringing statistics to the government and those parties is a really important thing for us. And then, of course, the architecture behind this solution is that now it's a SAP Cloud Platform solution. We have all the infrastructure in place. It has also taken some time for us because we started from a greenfield, and we need to build both knowledge internally, but also setting up the system. But it was not the hard part. The hard part was actually to take a paper-based process where you can take that paper and move it around, and then actually make it into an app where you don't have control of the sequence of the data coming in. You don't control what is written on that paper. You need to make sure that everything from the back end is brought up to the app, and also so it is actually validated and things like that. Simple things, but by taking it from a piece of paper where it's completely no sequence in it, and then put it into an app has been also an eye-opener for us. And another thing is, of course, also this digitalization of the fishermen, and also bringing them devices that they can actually use. We have taken the strategic position to actually go with an iOS device, both on the shop floor but also for the fishermen. And they don't necessarily have iOS devices themselves. So we are actually giving or leasing out hardware to the fishermen to make sure that they have what they need to be able to work. And that is also a part of this digitalizing the Greenlandic society. So this is our technical infrastructure. We have the end users. They can access the solution by the iPhone app. We have the iPad shop floor, and then we have the web application in the back office. We are using SAP IaaS for authentication, and then we have the SAP Cloud Platform, and they have connected to our backend system. So this is basically the simple infrastructure overview. We are quite happy, and it's working well. That was basically my presentation, and I'm happy to show you what we have been trying to achieve by digitalizing the fishermen, and we are really looking forward to finally get a chance to deliver it. Because of the COVID, it has been postponed several times, but it seems as though that now we are allowed, even though with a little bit of quarantine in Greenland, to actually go and do a pilot implementation in 2 weeks. So we are looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lars. That was very, very interesting. I just have a finishing question. Have you considered any key performance indicators? How do you know that this project is a success?
This is a good question, of course, because you really don't know before you start. But to get an insight of the perception of this project, we actually did several things. First of all, we did this design thinking workshop in Greenland with Trifor. That was the first indication we had on the perception of a project like this. Before we actually started the development, we also did some mock-ups on the screens and tried to make it on a small application, just going through the screens as they might have looked. And then we called in fishermen in Greenland locally, and we had their thoughts on it. They had adjustments and things they would like to actually change. And of course, the thing was that it was really random tests when we went to Greenland, because to verify the solution, because we have invited 15 people for that session, and none of them came. So we had to go to the port side, just picking a few ones there, saying, "Can you come?" So we were 10 people randomly chosen, and they also was a part of this, finding out what was working and what was not working. So, and they were really looking forward to solutions like that. And then, of course, during this development phase, the words has been spreading in Greenland, and the fishermen is actually asking, will there be a solution for us? Because they have heard from their colleagues that it would be quite nice. So basically, we have a strategy saying that if we get 1,000, 1,200 fishermen on the solution, we are very happy. We are expecting 400-500 people working with this application next year, at the end of next year. So this is what we are aiming at. 1,000 to 1,200 users of the application. So that is the final threshold for our success.
That sounds very interesting. I'm looking forward to knowing more about the numbers and to share the story with you for next year also. Thank you, Lars Bo.
Not a problem.